Oh, that was a good one. Hello, viewers. Now, I'm sitting in the space normally occupied by my Ferrari, but as you can see, my Ferrari isn't in this space because it's gone. It's gone for good. I've not actually sold it. I've given it to a dealer to sell on my behalf because that's just easier than having people coming around and farting in it and what have you. But it's quite a difficult thing to do. But in the end, I didn't really drive it very often, and it's become old tech. It's become out of step with the spirit of the age, and I just didn't love it anymore. I like looking at it. I think it's a fantastic looking thing, and actually possibly one of the prettiest Ferraris ever made, in my view. But that wasn't really enough, because that doesn't translate into a good drive. This is often the case with cars like that. It's actually almost as if it was designed to be a poster or a nice little model that you have on your desk to drive around occasionally whilst you're trying to avoid doing some work, but not to drive. If you are driving a very good looking car, that's actually a service to everyone else because they can see it, but you can't because you're in it. I've often argued that driving around in a supercar is a bit like buying a Rembrandt or a Jackson Pollock, but hanging it on the outside of your house so that everybody else can enjoy it. It is a service to the community, but it's not much of a service to yourself, or I didn't feel it was one anymore, so I've let it go. I'm talking about the 308, not the Speciale. Obviously I haven't sold the Speciale, that would be an absurd thing to do. The old 1977 308, which is a rare right-hand drive, early steel-bodied carburettor model with the desirable dry sump. And it's now for sale at the Ferrari Centre in Kent at a very reasonable price, actually less than I paid for it, because classic cars sort of did that a bit over the last year. Recession, Brexit, COVID, Boris Johnson, all the rest of it. If you're interested, it's in very good condition. Has a very comprehensive service history. It was owned by me and therefore looked after very carefully for that bit of its life, for my custody. It's in Rosso Corsa with a black leather interior. It's got the desirable open gate 5-speed shift with the dog leg first, obviously, so you can talk about that in the pub and talk about the evocative clack as you select second, which is difficult when the oil is cold. Yes, we know that. And you have to balance the carburettors, and that's quite tricky. It's an old car. I don't really like old cars. I know everybody thinks I must, and that I've got a garage full of luxury motors, most of which were built in the 1960s, and are all somehow in the single garage of my house. But it's not true. Now the Ferrari is gone, I don't have anything old. I've only got one old motorcycle these days. From where I'm sitting, I can see 3 electric cars. There is one with a petrol engine there, but I can't see it because the electric BMW is in the way. I think the past has gone. That's the thing. It's not as if a bit of the past is hanging around in old artifacts. They only exist in the present as well. I think the problem with driving old cars or using any old tech or anything that has utility is that you can't really appreciate it as it was in its time, because that time is no longer with us and we've since experienced and learned other things. It's a little bit like trying to do an authentic performance of 17th century music, which a lot of people do, and you can get all the details historically correct. You can have the right instruments, the right strings on your violins, you can have people dressed up in the right sort of clothing for the period, you can put the performance on in a period building and light it with candles. But you cannot hear it in the way people in the 17th century heard it, because we don't have 17th century ears. We've since heard the Sex Pistols, and they hadn't. We've heard rap and R&B, and they hadn't. And that's changed our perception of what music is. Music is an idea. The car is a thing that has utility and a practical application. Now, the idea of the car has progressed. The idea of music has progressed. So we reinterpret Bach, say, or Debussy, or medieval music, or plain song. But you can't really reinterpret an old Ferrari because it is an old Ferrari and it drives like one. I think we should preserve some of these things because car history is important, and we have to have a sense of where we came from, and he who does not learn from history is doomed to repeat it, as Plato said. You see, I wasn't paying attention, so there you go. Well, firstly, yes, I think it is inevitable that cars, like clothing, fashion, all those other things do say something about you. They must do, because you chose it, unless the thing has been foisted upon you, which cars usually aren't. What the 308 said about me was probably that I yearned for a golden age, or I was simply hankering after my youth when I loved the 308, because I thought it was a marvellous thing and it was utterly unattainable. So it was probably a bit of closure buying that car. I was exercising a demon from when I would have been 13. But I've done it. The ghost has gone. So the car can go with it. And indeed, it has gone. The right buyer for that car is someone who wants a Ferrari. You have to sort of get the Ferrari thing. And you need to be one of those people who believes that we have lost something from the car, that there was somehow an age when the car was right and very exciting, but we've since lost sight of that and it's become corrupted. I don't actually believe that. I think the golden age of the car is always now. We're going through a golden age of the car now because everything is up for grabs, everything is being questioned, how it's used, how it's owned, how it's propelled, what it's made from, whether or not it can be recycled and turned into a teapot or a sofa, or whether or not the interior should be made out of old copies of The Guardian and so on, like it is in the i3. So the golden age of the car is always now, but if you believe it was the 70s, and that may just be because you were young in the 70s like I was, so it's got sunshine in it, then yes, have the car and live your childhood dream a bit. And then, to be honest, you'll probably sell it after a few years and realise that you could spend less money on an Alpine. That's what I did. If you haven't driven a car since the 1970s, or you're still driving a 1970s Vauxhall or Ford Cortina or something like that, then by all means the Ferrari will seem marvellous. But there aren't going to be very many people like that. If you would like my old Ferrari, if you are somebody who believes in classic cars, and I know a lot of you on Drive Tribe say a car isn't really a car unless it's got a stick shift and no ABS and so on, and I don't agree with you, but I accept your point of view, in which case you might be interested in it. The details of the dealership where it is for sale are in the description, I presume. Yes, in the description, there. Like, comment, subscribe.
Standard!